let's go ahead and get started.
All right. Do you have the clicker?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm standing in that way. I'm going to sit down.
Okay.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Laura Schlesinger.
And I'm Nina Ukuku.
And we founded Venture Gained Legal. We work primarily with entrepreneurs and small businesses, startups, either growing, various stages of their growth. So from very early on till maybe mid-sized. So we've probably worked with a lot of the issues that you're currently dealing with. Hi, welcome. Hello. Why don't we actually, before we launch into this, I'd love to know your names and kind of a little bit about where you're coming from, since we have a small group here.
So my name's Anna, and I work along with Google Glass Explorers, and I'm working along with coding and programming for Glass. Okay. But the behind purpose of this is pretty much trying to change the ecosystem. We know that it starts one by one, person by person, like you say, working along with different entrepreneurs, helping us along with this. So that's our market.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
I'm just a student. My name is Israel. I go to San Jose State. Projects I'm working with OpenCV, computer vision software used for Java, C++, Android. Also made like an Android app.
Cool.
Very nice.
Are you planning on starting a company later on, or?
Maybe.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Get deep correctly.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, I'm Javier.
You had to remember your name real quick.
I better check.
Well, I'm learning English right now, so if I have little mistakes.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Tijuana. I'm a startup entrepreneur. I'm a computer engineer. I'm a local organizer of Startup Weekend in Tijuana.
Oh, wonderful.
Can we actually get you to talk?
I'm started a startup in the last year in Tijuana with some friends, and we're working and grow up in the startup, but in Mexico it's so complicated because there doesn't exist many ways to give the opportunities. And right now I'm working with some friends in Silicon Valley in another startup, and another of things I do is try to change the world and the mindset of the Mexican people. To join us to the culture, to sharing, to learn more technology, and push up our power of Latino people.
Nice.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Anup. I'm a recent MBA grad, and I'm originally from India. And in India, I had a mobile app development company. Okay. So the company is still working there, and here I'm just looking at options, and that's why I'm interested. I mean, I know some of the legal stuff back in India, but I want to know how it works here in the U.S. So.
One of our favorite clients is in India.
I'm Gabriel Reyes, and I'm VP of Marketing for Gamaji, and we're a startup in Austin, and we've created an augmented reality app that I just pitched here.
Wonderful.
And I'm here to just learn about the legal ins and outs, because we've got some patents. Okay. We want to know what's patentable, what's not patentable, what of our structure is proprietary, what isn't, all these kinds of things. Sure. I see in your card you got some good questions.
So I'm glad you actually got a chance to, you can hold on to the mic. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, if you can grab the mic and speak into the mic. This is being recorded, so that'll enable the people who are listening later on to be able to hear the questions that you're asking. So just a quick show of hands. So how many people, I'm trying to remember, who has already started a company at least once? I think through. Okay. All right.
There you go.
Awesome.
Oh,
awesome.
Okay.
And then when you were thinking about the legal, coming to a legal talk, what was it? Was it about IP? Were you thinking about patents? Were you thinking about corporate? Or were you thinking about a combination of all of the above?
What were your main concerns?
All of the above. Okay. All right. And has anyone incorporated their company before, or is everyone just sort of working at it and just seeing what happens?
We're an LLC.
You're an LLC? Okay.
We are incorporating our company.
Okay.
We have different startups, so every company is in a different legal step.
Okay, awesome. We're just asking these questions so we have a pretty good idea of how we should tailor our talk because we want it to fit exactly what it is that you need answered.
And we're probably going to open it up for questions early so that we can talk one-on-one. So what were your main concerns when you were considering talking to an attorney, like getting official legal advice? Did you have counsel that you have talked to, or is this kind of your first exposure?
My question is, where's everybody at?
I guess they're doing small, a bunch of people did lunch, but they're also doing, I guess, small focus groups. So
Okay,
there's
so
some
the
other,
groups are upstairs right now, right? The other tiny.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking, is everybody outside or upstairs? Oh, it's fine.
should we just,
Let's go.
all right.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of just basic areas. We're going to treat this as if you're one of our clients who's coming in and walking in the door, and we're just going to sort of talk to you about some of the high-level issues that you need to consider. So one of those is being incorporation. So typically, the reason why most people get incorporated is because they automatically go, I don't want any liability attached to me. And that's a very, very good reason to get incorporated. When you incorporate as an LLC or you incorporate as a C Corp, what you've created is basically almost like a shield that's in front of you and the rest of the world. And as long as you keep your personal business separate from what you're doing in your actual professional business, that corporate shield is allowed to be there. So say the company goes under or say the company is sued, the company is what's being sued versus you.
It won't touch your personal assets.
Yep, your personal assets won't be touched. That'll be completely protected. Now, when people start thinking about incorporation, they start thinking about the various types of legal structures. And each legal structure has certain plus and minuses. And depending on if you're talking to an accountant or you're talking to a lawyer, you're going to get two totally different types of advice. When you talk to an accountant will tell you, LLC all the way. You have pass-through taxation, all your profits, all your losses will come through the LLC. When you talk to a lawyer, depending on what type of business you have, if you have a lifestyle business or if you have a business where you're going to be seeking funding, we will tend to steer you away from an LLC and towards a C Corp. And the reason behind that is that when you're seeking investment, when you're dealing with stock options, when you have early employees, you almost have to reinvent the wheel to take what is considered basic Silicon Valley practices into an LLC. So for example, when you're dealing with things such as vesting schedules, you can do a vesting schedule in an LLC. In theory. But it's not as easy as what you might think. When you're dealing with investment, some venture funds will not invest in an LLC because of the tax consequences that it has for them.
Number of things. And so we realize that some of you guys are coming from different places. You have your companies in different places. The Silicon Valley standard before a VC will put money into your company is it's got to be a C Corp. A lot of times, even if they're ready to invest in you, if they see you're an LLC, they will make you go through the process of changing it. So that's just something we let people know. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, and pretty much the rest of the world will run like this, entrepreneurs that are bootstrapping, plan to always bootstrap, are not going to take venture capital money, you can do an LLC and you're not going to run into the problems. It's a lot less cumbersome financially to pay LLC taxes and that sort of thing. So those are some basic considerations. Either way, it's not something that you should just leave off. You know, oh, I just don't want to incorporate.
Exactly.
Do you have a question?
So we're an LLC, but if we're looking for investments, you think we should switch to a C?
Well, a venture capital, now if you're getting, say, a friend who's going to give you some money, it's a different thing. Maybe banks are going to be different, but if you're getting venture capital specifically, they will almost across the line require you to be a C Corp. So they might just require you to change. Now you can wait and have that be a condition of them giving you the money. So if you're already an LLC, you don't necessarily have to flip it now. But
also keep in mind that if you're wanting to give your investors certain preferences, you end up spending a little bit of money as far as legal fees, being able to do that within an LLC versus a C Corp where it's already been standardized, the forms, everything else like that.
So really we should really be a C Corp.
If you are...
Because we have, we're going to have to get into who owns how much.
Yeah.
Yes.
All of those things.
It's better set up for that. It's kind of like already ready to go. for all that stuff. It's much more cumbersome for a whole lot of nuances. It's a lot more difficult to do vesting and different equity ownerships with a LLC. Yeah. Yeah, you might.
And actually, that's a great little segue. Speaking of testing your partners, another thing that you want to do, and this is not legal on the front end, but it does become legal later on, is that you want to talk to your partners about ownership. And ownership should not necessarily be split equally amongst everyone because, number one, not everyone is necessarily doing equal work. But even outside of that, when it comes to voting, you want to, at some point, to be able to have someone who has some sort of majority that sort of just says, okay, this is where we're going. That's just from a practical standpoint. Now, there are a lot of different tools and different ways that you can start to determine what equity distribution should be. Some people think, well, if I'm the person who's technical, then I should be the one who gets the most equity. That might not necessarily always be the case. It might be the person who is technical ends up just coding, which you do need for the actual product, but they're not out there talking to customers, they're not talking to investors, they're not doing marketing, all those other different pieces that are just as important as actually building the product.
So I think the important thing is communication and kind of getting it settled and not thinking, well, we're best friends now and it's all going to be awesome and we're going to make millions of dollars. It's going to be great. I've literally had, I've had co-founders physically get into altercations in public. I had one nearly like a man nearly crying on the phone saying, I've contracted malaria 5 times for this guy and I can't believe he's screwing me over. And these are like, otherwise we're like super good friends beforehand. We've seen a lot of that. So once money gets involved, all of a sudden everyone's opinion changes. So it's really great early on to just spell it out just so that there's the open communication and you have it hammered out. So there's nothing ugly is going to happen.
Yeah. And once you've had that discussion, now it's time to put a ring on it. So what we mean by putting a ring on it is that you need to have shareholders agreements, partnership agreements between you and your co-founders and the actual company that really puts out in paper what the ownership is. So actually, while we're on that note, a lot of people think in the case of a C-Corp that, oh, I've already created a C-Corp. Of course I own 100%. But you've never actually issued shares to yourself. You have to actually issue shares to yourself for there to be really technically ownership. And so once you guys have already had this conversation of as far as how you're going to split equity, there needs to be a partnership agreement then put in place.
Yeah, just spell it out. So we talk about infrastructure. This is obviously the way that you're structuring your company, and this also includes a lot of other internal policies, and we're not going to get into all of that. We just kind of wanted to bring it up as something for you guys to keep on your radar when you're going through this whole process. It's very understandable for entrepreneurs. You have this awesome idea, you have this amazing technology, this super exciting thing that's going to disrupt the entire industry and all that sort of stuff, and you don't really want to pay attention to the more mundane issues, but those can really come back to bite you. So just focus on having, especially as you, I think ideally it's before you grow, but certainly as you start to grow, make sure that you have any internal policies in place, and you can talk to an attorney about that, you can talk to human resources people about that, but don't wait till something has happened in order to figure out what you want that to be and what all your policies are going to be and all of that structure is. Do
you want to talk about culture and how that ties into policies a little bit?
Yeah, should we do that?
Towards employment?
Yeah.
Dilution.
Yes.
And say once the investor comes in.
Oh, actually, can you pick up the mic and talk into the mic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This. Like this, look at the mic. Yeah, sorry.
Right into its eyes.
My question was about equity dilution. Say once we bring on a VC in the company, and if I'm owning only say 10% and one of my co-founders is owning 40%, then is it the equity dilution equal across all founders, or how does that work?
Yeah, it'll be generally it's diluted, in equal percent, so it all gets diluted. And of course, the way of thinking about that is, 50% of nothing is not as good as 5% of $10 million.
Right.
So,
right.
So that's not. That's one of those kind of like you're going to have to deal with that if you take investor money, you're going to have to deal with dilution. It's simply like they're not going to not take equity.
Right.
And there are a lot of ways you can protect yourself when you're going through that whole process. I know VCs don't have, I mean, they maybe have as bad a reputation as lawyers, but
Maybe.
there's a lot of stuff you can do to protect yourself, but there's also a lot of things that you can do to educate yourself about the whole process so that when it happens, it doesn't sound as shady, because a lot of it is standard.
Right. So where can we educate ourselves? Are there resources available, or should we reach out to people like you?
I mean, there's a lot of resources online that you can, look up, but I would also have, once you do have actual term sheets, have them reviewed.
Okay.
There are nuances in there that you're going to want to make sure, and there's, usually it's like a few things, but it can make or break. And also some, per your question, like sometimes people will set stuff up, you can set it up so that it's not equally diluted, and you want to make sure that that is not the case.
Right.
And that's not too uncommon. It's not common, but that's not too uncommon. So just be aware of that. And again, like Laura said, I would definitely talk to someone, and maybe even a little bit before the term sheet if you want to have information and educate yourself, because there's just certain things you do want to ask for, and you want to have that conversation on the front end rather than, okay, there's a term sheet now in front of me, let's start redlining. It's a lot harder to take back territory than to cut it down.
All right, should we do IP?
Do you guys also get into issues of copyright?
We're just going to go into that, right now.
You do a great segue, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. He's our plant, actually.
I guess you guys, it sounds like you pay me to be here.
So obviously nowadays, intellectual property is your most valuable asset for most, certainly any technology company. Usually that is the case. And just in general, in today's information economy worldwide, intellectual property is pretty much one of the most valuable assets out there. So just a really quick overview, patents generally apply to some kind of invention, and that can be a computer invention. Code can be a patented thing. It can be copyright, kind of depending on what it does. So, you talk to somebody about that. Copyright is usually referring to some kind of an artistic or written work. So a book, a painting, a photograph, a song. Those are all copyright, so they're creative works. And so that's why code is kind of one of those funny things where you can copyright the actual code itself so that nobody could completely replicate the code and run the program. Trademark is your brand. Trademark is your company name, your slogan, your logo. They are not interchangeable. They are all very different for the most part, other than that, the code exception where you can get both layers of protection. They're all generally not, usually you can't get two types of protection for one thing. So other than that, what I would recommend is early on doing an IP audit and really thinking about, do I need to be protecting this? What am I doing to protect this? How can I protect this? Particularly with patents, you need to start from day one. And what I would say to anybody who's doing something that may be patentable, let's just say you don't know, might be, what you need to do is you need to keep a patent workbook. Basically, it's a notebook, diary, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much like a diary where you're from day one, like, this is what I did today. And if it's a physical thing, like a lot of inventions historically have been an actual contraption device, you can draw it, you can draw your little specs. If it's computer, you can put the specs in. You can do this, you don't have to write it out. But the problem with, say, nowadays, you could put it in a Word document or Evernote or something like that, but it really needs to be time-stamped because this is one of those things that if there were an issue down the line, they want to make sure that this actually happened at the time that you said it. So in theory, you can type up a Word document and say that you wrote it 5 years ago when in theory, you actually just did it. So you need to keep track, you need to keep detailed entries along the way, and don't talk about it to everybody that you meet. Talk about it to the people in your company, but then make sure that it's understood that this is not a public thing, because if an invention has been disclosed, it will, you begin to lose you actually can't patent it. If something's out there in the public, it's technically not patentable. Now, you have a little bit of like a window of opportunity there, but for the most part, this is not something that you want to spread around and have become basically released to the public. So if you don't have the opportunity or the finances or the time or whatever it is to consult a lawyer from the beginning, at least be keeping that under wraps and keeping detailed track of it. And there are, if anybody wants a resource on how to keep a notebook, because there's a lot of stuff that you should put in there, you can send me an email, and we have a one-sheeter that just is like how to keep an inventor's notebook.
And it's something that later on we'll be doing workshops on as well. So definitely make sure that you email us so that we can let you know when that happens.
That's an issue. And then trademarks. I would recommend, I had a client the other day ask me if it was really important for him to trademark his company name and his product name. And the answer to that is, it's only important if you're planning on having it be successful. If it's not going to be successful and nobody's ever going to hear about it, no one's ever going to do anything like that, then it really doesn't matter. So if you're planning on failing, absolutely not critical to trademark it. However, as you all know, domain names, for example, are pretty much gone. Like some domainer out there has bought pretty much every name. So you have to think about it. They're not, by the way, the same thing, and I'll go over that in a second. But a lot of names, creative names, catchy names, have already been taken. So that's something you should look into before having all your business cards printed. I know you bought the domain, but you should look out there to see whether the name is taken, whether it can be used, and sometimes an analysis goes into that. So it's something to be considered, and if it is a catchy name, trademarking, if somebody else trademarks it, you cannot use it anymore if it's in the same industry. So it's just something to think about before just jumping in and, as I said, investing money and brand equity into something you don't know if you're going to really be able to use down the line. Now, the domain thing, there seems to be a lot of confusion out there about domain name versus trademark. So having the domain does not mean that you have the trademark. It does not mean that you have any trademark rights. It does not mean that you have any trademark preferences. So owning the domain has almost zero effect on whether you can trademark it or anything like that. Now, we can have a philosophical, intellectual discussion about whether that should be the case going forward or whether we should change the law, because I've had people do that with me. I'm like, we're just trying to help me help you. That's how it is right now, but there is a lot of confusion about that. So you can't, buy a domain name and think that, okay, well, now I'm good. I don't have to do anything else. So, just...
Like my company is called Reyes Entertainment, and I have a website called Reyes Entertainment, but I still don't own Reyes Entertainment.
The name. So is that a personal name, Reyes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would do some investigation or have somebody search it.
There are other companies out there named Reyes Entertainment.
Right. Okay. So what can happen in a situation like that is either one of the Reyes Entertainments will grow very large and sue everybody else and kind of knock you out. What the Trademark Office will actually do, this is funky, is if you're, say, limited to a small geographical area. This happens with a lot of mom and pop shops. This is why you'll see there's like a Whole Foods store on Haight.
Yep,
right?
in Valencia.
Right, and they've been there forever. And they obviously are not the same as the large Whole Foods conglomerate. However, they only have rights in like a small geographic area, probably the city of San Francisco, if not limited to that neighborhood. The problem with that, of course, nowadays is most people, unless you're actually you have a mom and pop shop, is you're on the internet. And so you're global, essentially. Almost every business nowadays is essentially global because you're on the internet. So that's why it can be problematic is globally, there might only be one. So if you wanted to have United States trademark rights, you'll probably have difficulty with that. And what ends up happening is if everybody else that owns a Reyes Entertainment is very nice and y'all get along, then maybe nobody will push each other out or try to sue or do anything like that. But you'll also run into, if anyone grows enough, you're going to run into confusion where people are going to be confused. So, you might consider rebranding at some point and having something that's more unique if you feel that you are growing.
And keep in mind that's why trademark law exists, is to keep people from being confused about similar items. We've had a client of ours that we love, well, we have had someone that we've worked with who wanted to create a name that sounded just like fill in the blank. Well, that's actually the issue. That's
like
infringement.
The
That's what
definition of infringement.
Exactly. That's what trademark law is trying to prevent against.
Laughable.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're working with computers.
Yeah.
Not a good one.
It's ultimately supposed to protect the consumer.
Yep.
So.
IP policy.
Yeah. So let's. So. Anyway, so that's the brief overview of that. I would do an audit of your company, like all the different types of intellectual property that you have. You know, think about how you want to protect them. And then also think about how you're handling other people's IP. So, you know, if you're reblogging or if you are posting other people's photos or you have somebody who is a star coder that just came to work for you from Google or something like that, and they have this great code that they wrote at their last job, that'll get you into a lot of trouble. So just, you know, have a policy in place, make sure you're paying attention to that stuff, particularly when you have employees or founders coming in that did similar work elsewhere. Make sure that you're not putting stuff that might be owned by another company into your company, because that could just decimate you if it's found out. So as I said, put the policies in place and actually adhere to them and ask the questions and address it. It's just, as I said, it's another communication issue where as long as you know what's going on, you talk about it, you address it, then you can easily protect yourself. All right.
And on that note, let's talk about employees.
All right. So this is another one of those, you know, it's easier to just keep things clean from the beginning than to have to clean up a mess afterwards. Starting from the beginning where we said make sure you have a partnership agreement in place and your entity is incorporated and that sort of thing. Start putting in your employment agreements, making sure that you didn't just download it off of whatever.
Nolo.
We Google. I mean, you can totally do that, but then make sure that it actually applies to the actual situation, because every agreement is somewhat tailored, and no attorney actually starts from scratch on those. Just to
give you the heads up,
let you all know. So no one's composing, you know, Gone with the Wind. It's all done from a template, but there are specific things that are relevant to your situation that you're going to want to have in there, and so make sure that you've got the right clauses in there for every type of employee. And you want to talk about independent contractors?
We'll just say this very briefly about independent contractors, because it's actually a much deeper conversation than what we can get into here. Do not 1099 everyone in your company, because not necessarily everyone is actually an independent contractor. There's certain rules that the IRS has set up, and then we won't even get into that basically looks at a test and goes, well, this person did this and this and this, and you provided this and this and this for them. So even though you are calling them a contractor, they're actually an employee. And now you have to deal with all those back taxes that come along with it.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to mess with the IRS.
You don't, because that's how they get Al Capone. No one else got him but the IRS. So keep that in mind.
But yeah, it's another one of these situations where just because you call them something doesn't mean that that's what they are. It's a legal definition. They have to, there will be, as she said, there's a test. So it's like you might call them an independent contractor, but it's whether they meet the test.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, it really depends on, you know, it depends on the type of job it is, but generally if you're working, if somebody's working in your offices and using all your equipment and working on your hours and doing your work, they're generally going to be an employee.
And if you're pretty much controlling the way that they do the task, you're considered an employee.
If they kind of work from their own studio and they use their own equipment and they work on their time and then they just do the project for you, good chance that they are an independent contractor. But there's a lot of gray areas. So if you got somebody who's reporting in at 9 a.m. every morning using your computer all day long, you want to look into the details.
Yeah. It becomes a question of how much control are you exerting over them.
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of a good way for to kind of guide if someone's actually a contractor or are they really an employee.
And there are plenty of class action suits going on right now against large companies that you would have heard of for doing this, for having a lot of people on 1099 that that were working for years at the
or even an intern, like the movie industry. That's
Yeah, there's a lot. So.
All right, so let's briefly talk about office culture and policies. So Laura and I had an interesting conversation yesterday, and she made a really, really strong point.
Uh-oh.
So we talked about what is
appropriate?
culture.
Yeah.
It's appropriate.
For Silicon Valley, I'm sure everybody's at least seen a movie or something like that. Silicon Valley is all about culture, and we're fun, and we have scooters for the office, and we have a kegerator and all this stuff. And not to get too lawyerly on you, but some things that work when you're 5 people do not work at 500 and do not work at 5,000 people. And I think it's really good, particularly for the younger people that think that it's just a lot of fun and maybe don't look long term. It's important to have judgment about what is really going on and what the ramifications could be of the culture.
And culture is not necessarily we go out and party, because if that's the case, that could be law. Like you could say that that's the culture of law. That's you want to create a culture that's much broader than that, almost more of a mission statement sort of deal. So one of the things that Laura brought up was that if you can't write down what your culture is about and post it on your website, then maybe you should reconsider if this should be your culture or if it even is your culture and it's just not a way that you're letting out steam.
Right. So culture, and culture is a big buzzword these days, particularly with Tony Hsieh's book from Zappos, and a lot of people are now all about culture, and we try to have fun, and that's great for innovation. I'm completely behind that, but I think that there's been a number of situations where it's kind of gone down a wrong path, and you end up in kind of ugly situations that nobody really wanted to be in and nobody realized. And what I meant about the writing it down was, if your culture is completely defined by the partying, which you see a lot of in Silicon Valley, that's probably not something that you would put on your mission statement. Our culture is about getting blitzed every Thursday with the entire company. So it's one of those things where it's like, what is your culture? Is it fostering creativity? Is it making sure that lots of different types of people are going to feel comfortable in that environment? Or is it only certain types of people are going to feel comfortable in that environment? And these are just things.
Does it become a mask for discrimination? You just want to be careful about that.
So think about it. Yeah, let's not even.
We won't go there. I'm from
Atlanta.
That's
She's
off
from
the mic.
Having a fun time right now.
Oh, they're
getting
many good
paid.
Things. Yes, they're getting extra overtime right now. So once again, this is something. Be purposeful about it. Just think about it. Talk to the executive team about it. What do we want this to be, and what does that mean? Like, if we do this, what do we expect that to result in the company? And be able to spell it out, write it down, condense it. So have that conversation.
And you also want to create what Laura talked about earlier, guidelines for the company. So guidelines for when people enter into your company, but then you also want to have guidelines for when they exit. That's something that's also equally as important, to have an exit interview. And again, to kind of go back over again the company policies on IP and the company policies on confidentiality, all those different things you want to also make sure occur. So you want to start setting the groundwork and start letting your employees know, when you start working at a company, this is what we expect, this is what we think of you, this is the culture, this is part of it. If you decide to leave the company, this is what is going to be part of you exiting. And now that you are leaving a company, this is what we expect of you. This is what you can do, and this is what you can't do.
All right, so we want to open up to more questions for you guys. I know that you all have your unique situations you're dealing with, so go ahead.
Well, I guess this is a very specific question.
So actually, before you get too specific, so I need to go ahead and do this disclaimer. It needs to be a little bit more general in nature, because we cannot give you legal advice because we haven't formed I was going to say, we have not formed we have not formed a client-attorney relationship.
You can go ahead, but there's only so much we can say.
It's just a simple thing. We have this.
And can you take the mic?
We have this part of our.
Oh, it's very.
Which is our viewer. you see how, you see all the photos?
Is this a patentability question?
Huh?
Is this going to be the patentability? So, just looking at something is not...
Patentability of a 3D viewer.
Right. So just looking at the actual invention is not enough to determine whether it's patentable. You actually have to look at what the prior art is and do an analysis. And it's fairly complicated. And there's a lot of research into the prior art that goes into it. So even if I, looked at that for a while, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
You'd have to break it down into all of the elements. And
and I'd have to do a research through all the underlying inventions, which I don't have in front of me.
Got it. Okay.
So, but
yeah,
so
you would
that's
need a retainer for that.
Well, it's a lot of time. I don't think everyone has that kind of has 8 hours.
No,
to spend
I
here.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
No legal advice.
Yeah, you guys are, everyone's always complaining about, oh, lawyers are expensive. You got us right now.
Okay, so Venture Game Legal, is that just you guys' company or?
Yes.
Oh, so both of you?
Yes.
You ladies entrepreneurs?
Yes.
So can you guys give me you guys' experience as lady and woman in this kind of legal status in tech? How was you guys' experience and struggle?
Oh,
It's been lively.
it's been interesting. Now we're both.
I love how you guys talk, how you guys speak. You guys are really, I love it.
Thank you. Well, and we're both peripherally involved in tech outside of the law firm. We both obviously do technology law, but we also work with nonprofits that are in the tech world. She works with Black Found. You can tell them Black Found.
So I'm one of the founders of Black Founder Startup Ventures, and we work to increase the number of successful Black technology entrepreneurs. Very similar to what Latism is doing and what Latino 2 is doing as well.
Yeah, and I'm managing director of San Francisco Girls in Tech. So increasing women in tech and entrepreneurs. And we've had some really interesting experiences. And as a woman, it's been definitely, there's been some interesting.
You sometimes wonder, is this going on because I'm a woman, or is...
That's some interesting, yeah. Those are going to be off the mic. But at the same time, it's a great time to be a woman. And certainly in this, I think in this area, it's a lot more amenable to having women. There are still those times when it's a struggle, but I think the important thing is not to focus on that, not focusing on the difficult thing and just focusing on doing anything that's really worth doing is going to be difficult along the way. So.
And I would even, for me, I use the fact, when I walk into a room, I'm going to stand out. I am a Black female from the South / also Nigeria. Kind of a freak in San Francisco, not so much in the South. And so I've just used it as my business and calling card. When I meet people, hi, my name is Nana da-da-da, and when I follow up with an email, I'm the African-American woman that you met. They're going to know, oh, yes. They are automatically going
to. Can I say that?
Oh, yeah, you've...
It's so like,
It's like, I don't know if I
very
can say
PC
that.
up here. Very PC up here.
We don't... But they will remember me.
As opposed to the other nanas that they met that day.
They might not even remember my name, but yeah,
that's
you're right.
True. I'm bad at names. So.
And so use it to leverage it. It's not a hindrance. It's actually to your benefit. People will remember you, and you now have another conversation that you can have with them. Now, that being said, this is just me giving you my own advice. Like when you're walking into business situations, you are going to have to present yourself a little bit more professional. And then, this is my personal experience, then gradually
I've had a lot
down.
of female founders speak for us, and so it's been amazing to meet all these women, but they have so many times told stories about, well, the first time I met with the VCs, they thought that I was the secretary and asked me for coffee. And you're like, does that really happen nowadays?
Oh,
but it
does.
still does. And just not letting it.
me for coffee.
It's because you're wearing a skirt, or. So, but yeah, I think it's not getting upset about it and just moving on to what's business.
And there's one gentleman, I can't say his name, but he walked into a room, he was an attorney, and they thought he wasn't the attorney, and he was actually the one who was leading a pretty big case. He used that to his advantage as leverage. They felt so guilty and so bad. He was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and use that, and I'm going to continue. And
I haven't done that yet. I might have to. Bust that one out.
So.
Yeah. Any other questions? Legal advice?
I think it's great what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We enjoy it. It's so wonderful to work with entrepreneurs because it's usually they're excited, they're doing something that they really enjoy. It's even though there are those contentious moments, as I said, we have a lot of founder stories, but generally it's actually a lot of fun. A lot of transactional work as opposed to people fighting and angry.
Yeah.
Arbitration.
Right. I mean, arbitration I would almost prefer to do than litigation.
Yeah,
but
without
that's
a doubt.
just from a cycle, yeah.
One of my old professors said that once you get into litigation, everyone's already lost. Even if you actually win the case, everyone's already lost.
We just want to keep you out of court because once you're in court, exactly.
There's no need. It's a small community. You can work through it. So that's a little bit of just unsolicited advice that I have. Try talking with people before you get into any sort of litigation, because 9 times out of 10, it might be that person's feelings, and this is sad, it might actually not even be about business, it might be about their feelings.
Yeah.
So talk to them first, resolve the emotional part of it, and then deal with also the business.
Yeah, there's actually Bar Association of America has statistics where the people using arbitration, almost 90% of the time they just wanted I'm sorry.
Yes.
Which is bizarre because you think about how much money we spend in this country litigating and all of that. So communication. So as we pointed out throughout the talk, there's a lot of things that if you communicate about and you lay out and you just kind of, here's how things are going to go, and you talk about it on the front end, then you're less likely to have hurt feelings on the back end that end up in all this nonsense.
All right.
Are things moving towards standardization and standardization of term sheets?
Well,
There is a lot. There
Yeah,
really is. I
term
mean,
sheets.
I would say term sheets are pretty standard, at least here, which is a huge amount of the venture capital deals that are going on. They are pretty standardized. It's
NDAs are pretty standardized.
everything's pretty standardized. And I wonder. I would assume that probably there's certain terms that are always going to be negotiated, like the valuation.
Yeah.
And that's just because you're always coming from 2 totally different sides of the table. But for the most part, things have been standardized, and so I think that's what we see. It would be, we would be like, what if we saw something that wasn't part of the standard?
And that's pretty region specific. Once you leave the U.S., no telling, and also depending on where you are in the U.S. too.
Yeah, like UK, because we've seen some international term sheets, and a lot of places are actually fairly standardized. It depends on how, whether they have law that's fairly lined up with the U.S. in general.
Yeah.
So,
All right. You're welcome. So definitely take the little audit that we placed on your chairs.
Questions to think about.
Ask yourself, talk about it, mull over it, and then just feel free to reach out to us. You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
I wonder if there's any more of those
I need
sweet
to go to
breads.
school my partners now.
Yeah.
Oh.